Hello, BookTube. It's been a while, and yeah, I've been busy the past few months, but uh, it's mostly because of school and because of classes. I didn't get into the habit of making regular videos, and because of classes, my reading slows down a lot, and so I usually don't have a whole lot to talk about. But there is a there is something I want to talk about today, and that's my recent reread of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And I read this. Um, I picked this up just about I think beginning of this week, maybe end of last week, and it was totally based on whim because I love this book. This is one of my favorite books, and I was just in the mood for watching the 1995 BBC miniseries, and I started watching. I think I watched the first two episodes, and immediately after I watched those first two episodes, I wanted to pick up the book again. And so that's what I did. I was just reading like a chapter a day for a little bit. But then after I finished the main book I had been reading, because I usually only read one or two books at a time, I focused on this full time, and that's what I've been reading for the past 2 days. And it was an absolute delight. I love this book so much. It's an absolute favorite. Uh, and this is the Norton Critical Edition. This is actually the edition I had to get for my first year in university, actually, when we had to. This was part of the one of the books we had to study in that class. And I remember the first time I had to read it. Well, very before I even started that class, I decided to read it in August before class started in September, and I thought it was just gonna be a stuffy like old-fashioned romance, but I found it so thrilling to read, and I really enjoyed it. And then when I think in the second term of that same year, we actually got to like focus and center a unit around there. I actually read it again because I got to read a good book and consider it homework, so that was a lot of fun. And then I haven't read it since then, and that was probably what 4 years ago, 3 4 years ago, probably around four. And so now I picked it up and I read it again, and it is as good, if not better, than what I remember it to be. Because the story, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the story. It follows the Bennet family, and specifically Elizabeth Bennet, and their quest to uh, find men to be married to be attached to, because their father has entailed away their house, and that means that when he dies, they will have no living or no real place to live. And so Mrs. Bennet's goal in life is to find all suitable husbands for all her children or all her daughters. And you got 5 daughters, and we get to see how uh, um, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy soon fall in love and um, marry both Jane and Elizabeth. And I know that this book has a lot of fans, but this book, I don't think we just appreciate just how well executed this is. At least I didn't. When I going back and reading it now, I didn't try to read it as critically as I usually like to do, where I kind of stick really into the details and underline passages and refer back and whatnot. I did do some of that this time, but really this was just a pleasure read. But this time I was struck just how well executed this story is, because you kind of you know what's going to happen if you've heard of this book at all. You know that Elizabeth Bennet is going to uh, hate Mr. Darcy, and over the course of the book, at the very end, she's going to marry Mr. Darcy. And the whole point of reading this, or one of the points of reading this, is to see that transformation. And I think it's the way she executed it is just it's so magnificent. Just how she builds prejudice after prejudice for Elizabeth, and then we get to see the pride of the stuck-up pride of Mr. Darcy, and then how those just crumble and blur, So then you have prejudice on Darcy's side, and you get pride on Elizabeth's side. But yet, at the end, they not only end up marrying each other, but they certainly end up better people in the process. And I really, really enjoy that. And another one of the aspects that I remember from this book, or from what I took away from reading it again, is just how necessary Mr. Bingley and Jane are as characters, as like supplements to Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and also to the craziness of her family, of Elizabeth's family, because they're both essentially one-dimensional, feel-good characters. Because Mr. Bingley is just a nice guy. He's amiable. He's uh, gets along with everyone, and he's so patient and good at conversation and whatnot. And Jane is just so nice. She can't think ill of anyone. It takes a lot for her to even consider that you've maybe done something wrong. And they're just feel good one dimensional characters that provide such relief from the rest of the characters of the story. And of course, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy are a lot more nuanced, and you get to see them fleshed out as you see them shifting in how they perceive one another and end up getting married in the end. And another part of that I really enjoyed about that is that how their love is not just a passion, a love of passion. Like recently, I also reread Jane Eyre, and that love between Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre is largely one of passion, even though there is more to it than that. But it is uh, Charlotte Bronte really goes for the passion in that love, in their love story, and in this one, there is passion there, as we see like Mr. Darcy is multiple times considered as just a man hopelessly in love, but yet he has a hold onto his rational faculties, his mind, and which allows him to be discerning and to um, really look inward of himself and consider, like, he did not want to initially, he never wanted to be in love with uh, Elizabeth Bennet, and he didn't, and he thought that he had no trouble, like it was just a something that will pass. He had no trouble in really having it go beyond a mere affection or infatuation, but it really just deepened the more he got to know her, and the more she got to know the real Mr. Darcy, and how Mr. Darcy changed. Um, her love was not as her love was like a rational, admiration at first, not for his character, but then that developed into a love on her part as well. And I just it's such a delightful story too. And another one of the things that I really enjoyed is just her writing style. Jane Austen, she's obviously or easily one of my favorite writers because I've read three of her books so far. I've read this one three times already, and I had to read Sense and Sensibility for school for my second year, a class in my second year, so I read it twice for that class, and that's a really good story as well. Not nearly on the level as this, I think, but it's a really good story. And then last year, I just read Persuasion, and I only read that one once, but her writing style is just so sharp and so pointed, and I can understand why some people think her dull because you don't always get the wit behind her sharp insights and her pointed, dry humor almost. And it's once you unlock that part of Jane Austen, she's more than just a romance writer. She's really like she can write comedy quite well. And and another thing that I had in mind when I was actually reading this was that there was someone who had said, I think it was online somewhere that I read, that this person said she thought that Persuasion was like the mature love story of Jane Austen's, where if you're younger, you will read Pride and Prejudice and fall in love with passion love story, and then when you're older, you revisit them and you'll prefer Persuasion because that's more of a mature love story because it's about two older people or two, late 20s. I think it's Anne and I forget the officer's name, but he's in the military or he's in the Navy, and they had formerly loved each other many years ago, and then they get back together and they rekindle their love for one another. And she considered that more of a mature story, and then considered this one you will appreciate it for what it is, but you prefer the more mature one once you're older. And though I'm considerably young, considered the person who said that comment was, I don't agree. I think there's just a magic to this story that Persuasion was really really lacking for me, because I really enjoy I enjoyed the writing of Persuasion, but the story was not totally there for me. It was lacking the not only the spark, because I think Sense and Sensibility also had that spark, though I do believe it's too long of a novel, but this one really has just all the spark in it, and it just blows me away how um, delightful it is, how funny it is, and how meaningful it is. And then to bring up the BBC's 1995 BBC miniseries again, I was essentially watching those episodes and reading this in conjunction with it, and that was so rewarding because that miniseries is so faithful, and I really love the casting of every character in that in that miniseries. And maybe that's just bias on my part because I've learned to enjoy the miniseries so much, but um, and the parts in that miniseries where they change stuff to make it shorter, or to just make it more of a cohesive story than all the details in the novel. It ends up always working in the favor of the story, and I just love their decisions, and I can't I can't get enough of even the casting of Mr. Darcy. He's just so good. There's that one scene where Elizabeth is playing the piano at, I think it's the piano. It's like a piano-like instrument that was popular 200 years ago. Um, and she's playing and singing in the drawing room of the Pemberley estate, and uh, we just get this shot of Mr. Darcy's face as he's just looking at her, like fully radiating the love that he has for her, and it's such a great moment. And then I also really appreciated I think the ending. Well, not the complete ending where they have like the double marriage, because in the novel we don't get any of their any description of their marriage, but in the BBC miniseries we get like a double marriage where Jane and Bingley and Elizabeth and Darcy are married at the same wedding, which is so weird. But the whole story of their love is really quite compelling. But I think I'm starting to ramble on now, so I might as well stop the video. I could go on longer about this book, about some of the details of the story, but I don't think I should, because longer isn't always necessarily better. But yeah, I certainly could continue talking about this if I had the chance. But anyways, that'll be enough for now. Thanks, BookTube.